Welcome to Where to Ski with me, your host, John Morgan. In this bonus episode, we hit on one of my favorite subjects, mountain weather. Nothing worse than planning a trip, getting somewhere, and getting weathered out. Either rain, too little snow, or even too much snow can affect your day. Weather has a lot to do with my own decision-making process of where to ski. Today, we're talking to a pro, Joel Gratz, founder and CEO of OpenSnow. Joel really likes three things: weather, snow, and skiing. He spent his childhood ski racing and teaching at Shawnee Mountain in Pennsylvania, then attended Penn State to study meteorology and continued racing. Things changed when Joel moved to Boulder for skiing in grad school. While earning a master's in environmental studies and an MBA, he found that forecasting snow in the big mountains of Colorado was very difficult. Joel studied the mountain weather patterns of Colorado and started sharing forecasts in 2007 via an email list called Colorado Powder Forecast. That evolved into his online platform, OpenSnow. OpenSnow has become a trusted source for the most accurate weather forecast, snow report, high-resolution weather maps, and ski condition information. So let's talk to Joel about what it takes to predict weather for skiing. Joel, welcome to Where to Ski. You know, I'm a neophyte when it comes to weather forecasting. I live outdoors, follow weather religiously, have no actual training. Times it seems like I'm throwing darts at a map to see where to go skiing. OpenSnow's got global capabilities for weather prediction and reporting. How do you guys do it?
Oh, it's a lot of work and a lot of passion. But there's two parts of OpenSnow. There is the written part where we have forecasters around the US and covering South America and parts of Europe, where they look at all of their favorite data for that location and then write up multiple paragraphs, putting the weather forecast data in human terms and more importantly, in skiing and snowboarding terms. So that's the written side. And then the other side is the data side, where we download, I don't even know the number because it keeps expanding, maybe 10 or more different weather forecast models, and some cover different parts of the earth. And then we mash all that together and adjust it as we think it should be adjusted, although there's never a perfect adjustment. And then we have data that has snow forecasts and wind forecasts and rain, unfortunately, forecasts and snow level forecasts and all the other data for mountains all over the world. So there's the written piece and then there's the data piece, and they both complement each other. And it all takes a lot of time and, has been over a decade in the making to pull all of this together.
That's pretty labor intensive doing the written piece. How many people do you have doing that?
Well, I think we have 10 or even a few more forecasters, and it is labor intensive. And unfortunately, it's the piece that is both really useful and not scalable. And I say not scalable both because, it takes real work and a couple hours usually to crank out 500 to 1,000 words and some graphics, because you have to research all of the weather beforehand. I'm not, and the forecasters are not just looking at one weather map and then writing, a quick blurb. I look at hundreds of weather maps to make sure I understand the setup and then discuss, where the best skiing conditions would be. So that part is unfortunately unscalable. And then the other piece is that everything we write is perishable. It's gone in 24 hours. The forecast is old news, right? You gotta write a new forecast because something has changed. And even in those 2 or 3 week periods of high pressure with no snow, it's still, things change because you're constantly looking for the next storm, looking for model updates, trying to figure out what's going on. So that's how OpenSnow started, is myself, Joel writing forecasts in Colorado, Evan Thayer writing forecasts for Utah, and Brian Allegretto writing forecasts for Tahoe. None of us knew each other. And we all started almost at about the same time, 2007, 2008. And we each just had blogs, and we were just doing it for the fun of it because we wanted to share our knowledge with some family and friends and eventually more people. And so readers said, hey, you should check out this other person doing something very similar. And so we all eventually, long story short, got together and worked to create OpenSnow.
That's a pretty cool story. So you must have got some proprietary algorithms you guys have developed too for the data part. Does that how long did it take you to be able to develop those and get those deployed so that they're actually usable?
Right. And so there's multiple pieces or multiple answers to that question. So I'm going to back up here and say almost all of the weather data globally is available to almost everybody. Almost all of it's free. Some of it costs some money. But I mean, at this point, you can get subscriptions to websites to show you all of the weather model data for maybe $20 a month. I mean, you don't need racks of servers and all. Like everybody effectively has access to all of the weather model data. So it is not necessarily us running our own models, although we do for various reasons that we get into. But the local TV weather person, the National Weather Service meteorologist, the Weather Channel, me, a random person on social media posting about weather, we effectively all have access to the same information. So at that point, it's all about what information do you gather, how do you mash it all together, and how do you adjust it? Because the weather model data does not say, hey, Joel, at Vail, it's going to snow 6.2 inches. The weather model data is much more coarse than that. So it puts big boxes over the earth, and it might say on that box that covers Vail, but also the nearby valley and the nearby 14,000-foot mountain, here's the amount of precipitation that might fall. But that box where that forecast is covers Vail, the base, the summit, the nearby 14er, the town. So what you have to do is start adjusting things for elevation because, in mountains, obviously things change from base to summit. And then there's not just one weather model. There are dozens of weather models. And no weather model is exactly right all of the time. And even if it's pretty right, this storm, it could be totally off next storm. So the best practice is to look at as many weather models as you can, weight them in some way, adjust them for elevation, and ideally you spit out a forecast that has some that is reasonably accurate. And that is very, very difficult because if you look at 10 plus models, they could be all over the place. And so do you weight them? Do you take a straight average? Do you take a median? What models are more favorable in one situation versus another? So all of these questions don't have perfect answers at all. And we're constantly learning and tweaking as well. But as us forecasters used all these models to write our written forecast over time, we thought it would be wonderful if we just pulled in the data ourselves and could adjust it the way we saw fit. And so we thought about that for probably over a decade. And then it took the better part of 6 to 12 months to build that system. And now when you go to Open Snow, all of the data that you see, we're not licensing data from AccuWeather or the Weather Channel or Apple Weather or something like that. We're going to the source, to these weather models, these computer programs that we can download that are sponsored by our tax dollars. By the way, big shout out to everybody listening. Your tax dollars, no matter what country you're in, have generally gone, a very, very small sliver of them have gone to support weather forecasting and weather modeling. And none of us would have good weather forecasts now and the improvement we've seen over the last 50 years without our tax dollars. So this is not like, oh, Joel Gratz solved weather or the Weather Channel is some brilliant organization. All of us are working hard, but the underlying technology comes from tax dollars and the support and the cooperation of countries all over the world sharing data so that we can get a global view of the atmosphere and then run these computer programs. So we download, that's a long way of saying we download a bunch of data, we adjust it, and now when you go to Open Snow, the data you see for the 4 to 8 inches tonight or tomorrow, or the wind speed, all of that is a mix of weather models that we have tried to tune to a mountain environment. And in Open Snow, you can also tap on any point on a map on land globally and get a forecast for that location with the same algorithm. So if you have a top secret backcountry location that you want to forecast for, you can tap that as your favorite backcountry location, and that point isn't shared with anybody else. So it can kind of be your secret forecast. So I'm really excited about having this capability. But as a meteorologist that is constantly in the weather, I am acutely aware, and as our forecasters, when a forecast doesn't work out, and that happens a lot sometimes. And so we're constantly trying to change things or make things better.
You've been talking a lot about shorter term forecasts too. You do forecasts all over the place. Long term prediction. When I sit down in the late summer or fall, I try and say, where am I going to go next year? And again, throwing darts at a dartboard, I have no idea what I'm doing. It's a little bit guess. It's a part experience, part odds making. I thought that the transition from La Nina to El Nino might throw the skiing off in Colorado this year. So I moved things further south. That's just me. I have no idea what I'm doing. How do you guys take a look at long range forecasting, and how do you recommend some of the listeners maybe look at it?
So there's two ways to think about where to ski or ride. If you want to go somewhere because the terrain or the town or the area is interesting and you want to explore it, then you book a trip and you go. And you're just aware that it may snow, it may not snow, it may be super sunny and warm, it may be cloudy with flat light. You don't know, but you're going to that location because, making things up, you want to check out Europe, or you want to, see a new state, ski in a new state or whatever, and you just go. And you're going for reasons other than snow quality and weather, because you just want to be there. So that's version one. And then you just hope for the best at that point. And maybe if you're in an area that's a couple hour drive from another area close by, maybe at the last moment you can kind of do with some day trips or a little bit of chasing, but weather is not the consideration. The other consideration is you want the best snow. You want wonderful snow quality. You want it to be soft, fluffy, cold, or sunny. I talk to a lot of people, they just want soft groomers and sunshine so they can see, not too much wind, not too much clouds. And I totally get that. But whatever your favorite weather is, if that is the main determinant of when you want to ski or ride, then you have to effectively book last minute. You have to wait until about 10 days out to figure out what the pattern looks like, who's got snow, where the base is good, what the pattern is setting up like. When I say pattern, 10 to 15 days out, we can often say this area of the world or the country could be warmer than average or colder than average or stormier than average or drier than average. Still 10 to 15 days out, it's very difficult to impossible to really nail down a certain day. And then you keep adjusting from there. So for instance, you could look at the forecast 10 days out and say, hey, it looks stormy across the Rockies. Maybe I'll book a flight, which for listeners that aren't aware, maybe that's Utah and Colorado and Wyoming and New Mexico. I'm going to book a flight into Salt Lake City and I'm going to rent a car with the knowledge that I could also drive 4 or 5 hours north into Idaho or Wyoming if that looked good. And if I really needed to, I could go a couple hours south to southern Utah. I could go 6 to 8 hours east into Colorado, 10 plus hours west into Tahoe. So having that optionality is important. And it just is important to know what you're going for, right? If you book a trip 6 months in advance and you want powder, reset expectations, because you're on the whims of the weather. You might get it, you might not, but you can't really do much about it. And if you really do want powder or sun or whatever some specific weather that you want is, you have to book last minute. Now, there are some people that are working on, we would call it kind of like 6 to 12, I don't know, 6 week to 10 week, 6 to 12 week even predictions, kind of, a couple months out. And there is occasionally some success with that. And I say occasionally because it really matters. It's not just, there's going to be storminess in the Rockies 6 weeks from now. What day, what area? Wyoming's pretty far from Colorado. It's doable. But so even if you can kind of nail a storm 6-8 weeks out on a given kind of couple day range in a given area, you're still waiting almost until the last minute to really navigate those plans. And often, and I'll just break this down, often the night before, you're still looking at data and you're looking at snow state cams and you're looking at sensors and you're trying to figure out, all right, what's best tomorrow morning and what do the roads look like and can I get there? So the optimization, fortunately or unfortunately, never ends. And so when you see people on Instagram or whatever your medium of choice is, you see these deep powder videos and it looks like they're always scoring or whatever, perfect sunshine or corn snow or whatever. And it looks like they're always scoring the perfect snow. the reason that they're scoring the perfect snow is because they try to get out as much as they can, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 days, right? You don't get it if you don't chase, and not every chase works. So they go out as much as they can, and they constantly refine until, 4 a.m. of that morning to go out. So, I think resetting expectations, if you're going to ski 5 to 10 times a year, or even 20 times on a couple trips that are pre-planned, just fingers crossed and hope for the best. But if you really want to score the best conditions, it's a flip to think that you have to be in it a lot during the season. It's not just, I go skiing 1 week and hope for the best. And you'll have to be willing to adjust up until the last minute, deal with the travel shenanigans, because often it's worthwhile, but sometimes you get skunked, and even the best chasers get skunked.
Hey, you can even get stuck with too much snow or too little snow. It can rain. The temperature can swing over the course of a couple of days, can swing like 10 degrees, and
Yep.
you'll be hosed because it's raining, or you can get snowed in and the mountain will be shut down because, wow, it hit harder. And
Yeah.
you can't
Well,
you can't ski for 2 days, and then it's only,
it's
that might
settled.
be half your trip.
Right. Well, and you bring up 2 points that I wanted to go in depth on. And this is some of the things that separate Open Snow from other weather apps. And to be clear, I'm not claiming that we're, massively more accurate or have some secret algorithms. I think what we've done to adjust our algorithms for snow in the mountains is quite good. But the key points are that we're sourcing, or we're providing data that is just not available on most weather apps and websites because it's not important to most people. Things like the snow level. What is the elevation where rain will turn to snow, or snow will turn to rain? And you can watch that on storms, especially in some lower elevation areas along the coastal range, in Tahoe and Oregon and Washington and up to British Columbia, and even in Europe. You can watch those snow levels change, and we show you what the base and mid and summit elevation is. We show you what we think the snow level is, but your point is exactly right. You might have a storm that starts warm and winds up cold, and that snow level comes down and the powder starts thick and then gets fluffy. Or it could be the opposite. It's cold and fluffy, and then that snow level creeps up, starts to turn to rain at the base, and it gets mushy. And you can deduce all of those, and you can deduce those issues or potential issues on Open Snow. The other thing, and this just takes experience that you bring up, is operational issues. Yeah, it's great when a mountain gets 2 feet of snow overnight, but a big mountain, they may not open the next day if that causes a lot of avalanche risk and they just can't keep up. So knowing which mountains are more predictable to be able to open with big snowfall, and when roads are generally open or not open, all of these operational issues, I would say honestly, are just as important as nailing the weather, because you don't want to go somewhere, have the forecast work out, and then, as you say, you can't ski.
Yeah. And I've had that happen. I've been stuck at the top of a mountain in Europe and couldn't even open the door to get out to ski for
Yep.
5 days.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it does happen. It's actually kind of fun when you do get out the door, though.
It
Do you
is.
go?
Yep.
Do,
Yeah,
do you take into account some of the big, things that we hear about as normal mortal weather forecasters, like La Nina or El Nino? How do you take into account big patterns like that? Does that skew your forecasting at all?
So those big patterns load the dice just a little bit for shifts in snowfall, more snow or less snow, warmer or colder, over the course of a season. But those big shifts like El Nino, La Nina, the Arctic oscillation have zero impact on our forecasting from 0 out to 15 days. So those big shifts are interesting to talk about. Okay, I'll tell you a little secret. The reason we hear about El Nino and La Nina so much, even starting now for next winter, right? We're recording this in March of 2024, and there's already talk about El Nino flipping to La Nina this summer and being La Nina, which is colder than average ocean temperatures for next winter. And the reason that we care about El Nino, La Nina, when oceans change temperatures, they affect the weather patterns above them, which then affects the weather patterns all over the globe. So even though La Nina and El Nino's out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, nobody's skiing there, that changes weather patterns all over the globe. But the reason that you hear so much about El Nino and La Nina in the spring, in the summer, in the fall, is because it's virtually the only weather phenomenon that is even a smidge predictable beyond a couple of weeks out. So at this point, I can't really tell you I can't tell you what's going to happen next winter. But if El Nino is shifting toward La Nina, well, historically, we know over the last 50 years when there's a La Nina, where areas are favored for more snow or less snow. And so we can talk about that a little bit. But you brought up El Nino favoring southern areas this year, the 23-24 season. And on average, that's true. And the northern areas of the U.S. and up into Western Canada are generally below average snowfall for El Nino. And in most cases, that has come true this year. Montana has been below average. British Columbia has been below average. But here's the thing. Just knowing if a season will be above or below average, even if that forecast is correct, and it isn't always based on El Nino or La Nina, it doesn't tell you what weeks, or months or days are going to be great. So for instance, British Columbia has had again, this is 23-24 season, has had a pretty low snowpack compared to average this year. But in late February into early March, a lot of areas got 3 to 5 feet of snow in 2 weeks. And gosh, that's great skiing and riding, right? So if you just kind of wrote off British Columbia this year because it's El Nino, well, you could have just missed, a phenomenal couple of weeks of powder and conditions, even though the snowpack is below average. So to circle back, none of our forecasting at this point uses El Nino, La Nina, any of that. Maybe in the future, if we do a very long range, like season ahead type of forecast, 3, 6, 9 months out, maybe we would use that. But again, it is such a smidge of difference. It's like saying, well, instead of it being 50-50 versus, I'm just using Vail as an example because a lot of people know Vail, or you can use Aspen or anywhere. But instead of Vail or Aspen being 50% chance of above average snowfall or 50% chance of below average snowfall, if you factor in El Nino, maybe it changes the odds a few percent in one way or the other. And those odds can change depending on where you are in the world. But for a lot of areas, those odds just shift just a little bit. And so it's really difficult to impossible to use those big shifts like El Nino or La Nina to figure out where you should ski or ride. And hey, you could, Taos and New Mexico and Santa Fe, those areas all had way above average snowpack in December into early January. But that doesn't guarantee you that the week that you go there, it's going to be favorable weather. It could be dumping snow. It could be windy. It could be anything that week. So it's a tough game to play.
It's a really tough game, and you get very granular about it too, because you basically say, okay, tomorrow it's going to snow 6.5 inches in Vail or wherever, and that's hard. That's really hard. Can you regionalize this? Do you regionalize this? There's a lot of different regions you can go to. Everything from Hokkaido, which is a snow globe, yep, to Northern Europe, to Central Europe, to the different parts of the U.S. and Canada.
So for the long range forecasting, which is beyond about 2 weeks out, we don't do any of that at this point. When it comes within 2 weeks to 10 days, you can look at all of these regions. So I have open snow. So I mean, I'm not just a founder, I'm also a user, right? Like this is the site that I would use even if I didn't start it. So I have about 60 favorites. I think 62 at last look. And so you can favorite certain areas or any areas you want, whether they're points that you put on a map and they're custom locations that nobody knows about, or thousands of skiers around the world, or heli ski or cat ski or Nordic, whatever it is. So I have a list of about 62 locations, and I have them organized basically outward from where I live. So I live in Colorado. So the first maybe 20 are Colorado. And then I have some in Utah, New Mexico, and Wyoming, because those are, I could drive there if I needed to. Then I have some in California and Idaho and Washington and British Columbia, because, I want to keep track of what's happening and maybe there could be a chase. Then I have some in different parts of Europe and Scandinavia. And then I also have some in Japan, just keeping an eye on the whole thing. So and then I can switch to a map view off my favorites and kind of look, okay, where's the forecast looking for the next 10 days? With the amount of snow. And now a 10-day snow forecast, even though we're showing you, I'm making up a number, 24 inches, it's not going to be 24 inches, right? Like no weather forecast is that accurate, but it gives you directionality, right? Like if it's 0 inches over 10 days, it's probably not going to be, it's not going to flip to, 30 inches overnight. And if it's a couple of feet over 10 days, it's going to oscillate, but it's probably not going to go down to 0, right? So directionally, you can look at a map across the globe and understand, hey, over the next 10 days, where is the snow going? And so I do chase. I mean, I have a family, and my wife and my son also like to ski powder. My son has some challenges because he's 6.5 and he has 105 centimeter skis, which make it difficult to ski powder. But, we do attempt to chase as a family. So I always look at this, but I don't have some special sauce where, while I'm saying you can't really forecast out beyond 10-ish days, I'm actually looking out 3 weeks and pulling the trigger. I'm keeping my eye on things, on patterns that develop, but I don't really feel comfortable, even at 10 days or 7 to 10 days out, pulling the trigger on a storm. I am so nervous doing that, and, booking travel plans that are non-refundable. Like that is the most nerve-wracking thing. That I'm checking weather models every hour of the day, trying to see if things are changing. So this is, if you feel nervous, listening to this when you're thinking about chasing or you're not sure how the weather's going to work out, we all do. This is difficult, but that's using the favorites list and then mapping the favorites list is the way that I kind of keep tabs on the world.
That's helpful. That's really quite helpful. One of the biggest dangers is, as skiers, we face are avalanches, especially the backcountry skiers. You mentioned earlier on that a lot of the weather data is funded by us in the form of getting it all from the government. Most governments do a pretty good job of avalanche forecasting. Do you guys work on any avalanche forecasting of your own or reflect any of what the government's put in there?
That's a good question. We are not avalanche forecast experts, so we do not forecast any of that or commentate on it ourselves. However, we do pull in all of the avalanche forecasts in the US and Canada, and we're working on Europe too. And you can view those within OpenSnow. So there's a map layer that shows all of the avalanche forecasts. And when you go into a specific location, a ski area or a custom point, if there's an avalanche forecast available, there's a tab where we show you that. We show you the summary, and then there's a link there where you can click out to the local avalanche center and read more. That is a completely, while avalanche risk and snow science and weather are all connected, the forecasting of avalanche risk is a completely separate focus than the forecasting of weather. And we are staying in our lane at this point.
It's a whole different set of skills.
It's a whole different set of skills with a different group of people. And the folks that do it are, dedicated their life to that, just like I've dedicated my life to mountain weather. So we link out to the best sources of information that we can find. And we hope that that's helpful to people that use OpenSnow.
Let's talk a little bit about climate change. In New England and the Alps, for example, I see rain in midwinter more prevalent, especially at the lower altitudes. I see glaciers, really incredible videos over time of glaciers in Europe shrinking. Personally, I tend to plan for resorts at higher altitudes, especially in this earlier late season. Past that, I don't know what else to do, but I don't know what you've seen over time. You've been doing this for a while. You've seen much of an evolution in terms of the way climate's being affected by what we've done and how we live.
So you bring up a bunch of good points, which are in the right direction. So I'll talk through this. One, people always ask me what I've noticed, and what I've noticed does not matter in the least. It's what the data says. So I look at the data, and here's what I understand. And also, I will preface this by saying I am, I'll consider myself an expert in 1 to 10 day weather forecasting in the big mountains in Colorado and some regions around the world. I am not an expert in climate, but because it's important, it impacts us and people ask about it, I try to stay up with as much research as I can. And here's what I've seen. Temperatures are warming. Not every weather station across the globe shows warming, but the vast majority do. And the oceans are warming too. So if you remember only one thing from this podcast and even this climate section, it's that temperatures are warming. They will likely continue to do so. And that's all you need to know about the impact on skiing, because warmer temperatures are not good for snow, right? So that's it. So what you said is the exact point that I make when I give community talks, which is there's only one undeniable way to fight against warming temperatures, which is go to higher elevation. That is the only undeniable, super logical, don't need a fancy computer model to tell you way to do that. So you're exactly right. So with warmer temperatures, again, without invoking any fancy simulations of the atmosphere, and not too much physics or math, what happens with warmer temperatures? Less snow, more rain, right? Like that's just very, very simple. That means lower elevations are more susceptible now than they have been to rain events or more melting snow. Areas that have always dealt with the rain snow line because they are at lower elevations. Parts of British Columbia or Washington State or California or parts of Europe, those areas have always seen rain and snow during the winter, depending on a storm. And now that temperatures are a few degrees warmer, the lower elevations, just on average, will probably see a little bit more rain as that snow rain line creeps up due to warming temperatures. So your instincts are exactly right. If you need to plan ahead, the best way to kind of, mitigate climate change from a skiing perspective is higher elevation. Now, some storms are still plenty cold enough to snow all the way to the valleys and you get great snow the whole way, so you can chase those storms. But again, higher elevation is the key now and the foreseeable future. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't go to Steamboat because the base is 6,700 feet. It's snowing plenty there, and it will snow plenty there, for decades to come. But we're just talking averages, right? So that's temperatures. Temperatures are going up, which means probably more rain than we have seen on the shoulder seasons, fall and spring, at lower elevations. This, again, you don't need a weather person to tell you this. This is just kind of common sense. The next piece of that is precipitation. Has the changing climate changed storm tracks, precipitation, winter storms? And the answer is generally not in any organized way. You can find studies that show, precipitation is going up here or down here, but I have not seen convincing evidence that has withstood the test of time that shows that storm tracks all over the world are changing in a predictable way. Some models say areas are going to get wetter. Some say they're going to get drier. I don't know. So it is a pretty common talking point that I feel like reporters just kind of throw into a lot of articles. They're like, oh, the weather's getting crazier and wackier, and we have no idea what's going on. Well, one, weather forecasting continues to get more accurate because the physics of the atmosphere are not changing. We continue to model them better, and computing gets more powerful. So don't run around thinking that the sky is falling and we're done for, because weather forecasting is actually getting more accurate, not less. So we understand the atmosphere. Two, I don't see any change in storm tracks that are immediately caused by climate change. But three, remember, temperatures are increasing, are warming, which means lower elevations on average over decades will have harder time supporting snow and quality snow than they do now. So this isn't that the ski industry is going away tomorrow, right? But when you look over a span of decades, even if we can put the brakes on CO2 emissions and temperatures don't keep going up, this is a decadal issue and a multi-generational issue to get everything under control. So it's something that we're going to be dealing with, for everybody who's listening to this, all of our lifetimes, whether you're young or old, we're going to have to deal with this.
It's going to be our lifetimes and a few past that.
Yep.
So you had, as you said earlier, we're in the beginning of March here, like toward the middle. You had a pretty big weather event in California last week. How hard were you guys hit for getting data to people over when a big storm like that hits?
Yeah, so the storm, roughly dropped 80 to 100 inches in about 3 days or so, which is a very big storm for Tahoe. Not necessarily unprecedented in every way, but it's a very big storm. And you can get big snowfall like that because Tahoe in California is close to the Pacific Ocean. What do you need for snow? You need moisture. For any type of precipitation, you need moisture. What's one of the best moisture sources? A big body of water like the Pacific Ocean. So that's why Tahoe and along the coastline can get these 8-foot storms in in a couple of days, whereas that just doesn't often happen once you go further from the moisture source. So we do our best to get excited in a reasonable way. We're not hyping it because we just want page views or we want people to subscribe. We've never done that. And if we did that, this would be a very short-term business, and we all effectively want to do this business for the rest of our lives. So we don't sacrifice credibility to, pump up a snowstorm. And also, we've all been in a situation where we forecasted too much snow, not because we're trying to get attention, just because the forecast didn't work out. And people hate that, as do I. I hate when you forecast too much snow and it doesn't. I mean, I still remember being a kid, with a forecast for 6 to 10 inches, thinking that the next day school is going to be canceled. And I woke up and there was a dusting. I mean, that's the worst feeling, one of the worst feelings in the world. We all are cognizant of that. So when we see big storms coming, we are cautious to be thoughtful about how we communicate, which is explaining the potential that, hey, this actually could be a big storm for these reasons. We talk about why, but also that beyond about 5 days, we have very little confidence in the exact snowfall numbers. And then we slowly narrow those snowfall numbers down as the storm approaches. So yeah, people were excited. People were emailing us, but that's, for us, while it's exhausting in the moment, because you're checking all this data all the time and writing updates and thinking about how to best communicate it, it's also kind of like the Super Bowl, right? We love this, right? Not only are we weather forecasters, but gosh, we love snow. We love storms, and we just like to explain it, talk about it, help educate people about it. So it's fun for us, even though it's a lot of work.
So you mentioned this, you ski a lot. What's your go-to spot to go skiing? You live in Boulder, you've got a lot of places you can choose from.
Yeah. And so, some people are surprised that I live in Boulder and not, Eldora is about 45 minutes away, but they think, why don't you live in in the middle of Colorado or somewhere in a mountain community? And I came to Gratz. I went to Penn State undergrad for meteorology. I grew up skiing Shawnee Mountain in Pennsylvania, which was amazing and super fun as a kid growing up racing and instructing. And then I came to the University of Colorado Boulder for graduate school in business and meteorology and policy. And I like the town. I like the optionality. Yep, I have to deal with I-70 and figure out all that stuff. But I can also, I also just appreciate the town and the hiking and the proximity of some of the more urban environments. So that's why I'm in Boulder. But I have had, as we discussed just before the podcast, I've had a great powder day at virtually every ski area in Colorado. So, and also it's not like I love powder, but I also love carving on soft groomers and sunshine. I mean, I really love to ski. Even though powder is the dream. So I don't have a favorite ski area. I don't have a favorite backcountry area. I think, sometimes I love skiing backcountry in the early season, and then I get tired of working my butt off for 2 hours to make, 12 turns. And then I just want to rip some laps in the resort. And then I go to a resort and it's fun, but then there's a lot of people around and I want to go to the backcountry. I want to go to a smaller mountain, and it just ebbs and flows. So, I don't necessarily have a favorite mountain. I spent a lot of time in northern Colorado. My son had to take ski lessons, and that's a little bit closer to me for proximity reasons. But we travel as much as we can. I've skied in Europe, I've skied in Japan, skied all throughout Western Canada and the United States. And a lot of it, it's not just my enjoyment of skiing, but you learn a lot about weather forecasting by going to different climates and going to different areas and understanding that what might work for a weather forecast in Colorado is you need different data, somewhere else. So it's both a kind of scientific curiosity and just fun to ski around.
That must be actually kind of fun to be able to dig into another location and go, wait a minute, the patterns here are different. That's
well, and it's how you learn by going, right? I still remember 15 years ago storms that I missed and that I forecast and it was wrong, and we went somewhere and I was expecting a foot and we got 2 inches and my friends were making fun of me. I remember those, right? I remember sitting there on the mountain trying to figure out why are we getting these piddly flakes and the snow is not stacking up and I expected a foot. And then I go home and I spend hours sifting through data trying to figure out what is a logical reason for that and how can I not mess that up again, right? But that making the mistake is the absolute best way to be motivated to learn new things.
Hey, and a lot of things I learn more from making mistakes than I do from getting it right.
Yep.
What's the best day in the mountain you could imagine?
I almost just had it, I think. I was just so my son took lessons at Beaver Creek every Sunday this year. And amazingly, there were a lot of powder days on weekends this year. It doesn't always happen, but there were a lot. And this past Sunday at Beaver Creek, they had 15 inches overnight, including 5 inches in an hour, in 1 hour, which is about the highest snowfall rate that you can get kind of globally anywhere. It's just kind of amazing that that happened. So we woke up as a family really early, got in line very early. We're a couple chairs back from first chair. And then my wife and my friend, unleashed and skied powder for on track powder for 2 hours. And I went out with my son. And, it's hard for him as a 6-year-old to ski, deep snow. But, the bottom of the run, he was twice as good as the top of the run, just trying to get the hang of it. It was a long run, took a long time. But I think he also got a face shot in there somewhere on a video in between getting stuck and falling a ton. I'm not trying to make this like Instagram glory. There's all sorts of challenges and issues, and it's not, all perfect. And most of the run is not perfect. But that was fun because everybody got to do what they wanted to do. And, yeah, I can see in 5 or 6 years, we're all as a family skiing powder. But at this point, we kind of broke up and had a bunch of fun together. And then he went off and went to his lesson, and I met up with my wife, and we skied some more powder in the morning. And it was delightful. And, that's great. Skiing groomers with my dad and my son in 35-degree sunshine is awesome. All the way to, perfect powder in Hokkaido, where the mountains are a little bit shorter, but the snow quality is amazing. And you go down and have some ramen and I mean, the woods are just enchanting and calming, and what an amazing place. Like, it's all incredible to operate ski in Europe, man. I mean, like, that's super fun too. I have a great time with all of it. And yes, I am a powder snob and a snow quality snob, and I want the absolute best. But gosh, there's a lot of fun to be had with family and friends, even when the snow's not ideal and perfect. And it's really about dialing in the location and the expectations for whatever is happening. And I sense that maybe we're kind of wrapping up. So I'll leave you with this, that a mentor of mine, Dr. Jim Steenberg, who's a meteorologist and professor at the University of Utah in Colorado, or in University of Utah in Salt Lake City, sorry, he has dedicated his life to researching snow, and they call him Professor Powder. But he always says the key to great powder skiing is low expectations. And man, when you go up to the mountain and your expectations are sky high, I mean, yes, sometimes that does come true, but there's a lot of ways for things not to work out. Operational issues, driving, winds, lines, what wind effect, whatever it is, right? Avalanche closures. And so it's really hard to have a perfect day, really hard. But if you keep your expectations moderate, you're often surprised on the upside. And I know that sounds like some, quaint Twitter life advice or whatever, but every time I'm rolling up to the mountains and I'm super excited, I just try to quell it just a little bit. Because if you're out there in the mountains a lot, a guide in Canada told me, if you're out there a lot and meet the mountains on their own terms, you're going to be pleasantly surprised more often than not, versus having sky high expectations, which can just kind of lead to disappointment.
Well, we have some pretty cool skiers on this show, on these varying episodes, and some of the things that come through from them. We had one that Zach Christ, and he turned to us and said, it's not about ripping up 50 runs in a day. It can be down to just making that one run, that one amazing run, and it could be anywhere at any time. You just don't know where it's going to be.
I rarely ski full days. Our company has 10 full-time people. I'm super excited about a bunch of new products we're developing. I have my hand in most of them. So I like to go ski for a couple hours and then come back and work. Yeah, like this is exciting. But Zach is right. I remember a handful of runs over the last 20 years, specific runs in specific places. I know exactly where they are on a map. I know what they look like. I will never forget them. And while I love going out and cruising around, that's exactly right. And that's what keeps you coming back, right? Because you don't know, is this the day that another one of those memories will be made? So it's fun to go explore.
So, Joel, science and skiing together, that's quite a career you've made for yourself. That's awesome. Thank you very much for taking some time to talk to us about weather forecasting and skiing and life in general. During the season, Joel's either behind a computer looking at models, looking at handwritten reports, or he's out doing laps. If you want to check out Open Snow, go to opensnow.com. If you have a question for the team at Open Snow, just shoot them an email. If you like our podcasts, share them. Visit our website at wheretoski.org and listen to perspectives on some of the world's best ski areas. Thanks for joining.